The morning had that strange stillness, like something was waiting to happen. Hailey stepped off the elevator clutching her folder, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her long, wavy chestnut hair framed her face, damp at the ends from a light morning drizzle. Her pale skin glowed in the sunlight that spilled through the massive glass windows. Her blouse, a cream-colored U-shaped top that hugged her form, slid subtly with every step. Her fitted black skirt hugged her hips, firm and neat. She had dressed to impress and to protect the small flicker of hope still burning in her chest. She paused at the front desk, eyes scanning the quiet lobby. "Hi, I'm here for the 9:15 interview," she said, trying to hide the tremble in her voice. Hailey Monroe. The receptionist, an older woman with silver streaks in her bun and warmth behind her glasses, smiled gently. "Of course, sweetheart. 1 second." She scanned her monitor. But something flickered in her expression. "I don't seem to have a Monroe listed, but there's a slot open with Mr. Logan in conference too. Maybe a scheduling mix-up." Hailey hesitated. Her heart thudded once. Twice. This wasn't the company she had applied to. But her resume was in hand, and the name matched the building. Maybe it was just an internal office shuffle? She nodded, summoning a smile. "Sure. Let's roll with it." The receptionist handed her a visitor badge and gestured toward a hallway of frosted glass rooms. "Second one on the right." As she turned, the sound of her heels echoed through the corridor, sharp, brave, betraying none of her inner panic. Inside, a man sat alone at the head of a sleek black conference table. Mid-30s, dark hair, sleeves rolled up, face worn but handsome in a quiet, commanding way. His jaw was tight, his gaze unreadable, focused on a laptop before him. He didn't look up when she entered. Just gestured calmly to the seat across from him. "Hailey Monroe?" he asked without emotion. She nodded, swallowing her nervous breath. "Yes. I think I'm in the right place." He finally looked up. Their eyes met. And something, brief, silent, strange, passed between them. Recognition? No. But something like it. The way two strangers sometimes pause in front of an open door neither expected. "Let's begin," he said. And so, it did. Logan leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his arms, his eyes scanning Hailey with a subtle sharpness, not inappropriate, but careful, curious. He wasn't the type to make small talk. Everything about him, his clean-cut shirt, his slightly rolled sleeves, the way he tapped once with his pen, said, "I notice everything. But I don't reveal anything." Hailey shifted, adjusting her folder on the table, trying to quiet the tiny tremble in her fingers. "Tell me about yourself," he said, flatly but not unkindly. The usual interview opener. Yet somehow it felt heavier in this quiet room. She inhaled and tried to steady her voice. "I'm originally from Ohio. Graduated with a degree in communications. Worked at 2 marketing firms since, but the last few months have been a little rocky. I'm looking for a role where I can grow and contribute something real." His gaze didn't waver. "What happened at your last job?" A blunt question. Not judgmental, just precise. She blinked, surprised. Most interviews eased into that. But she liked it. It was direct. Honest. "I spoke up about something unethical," she said slowly. "A client was pushing content that manipulated data, and I raised concerns. It didn't go over well. Eventually, I was let go." She didn't look away. Neither did he. For a long moment, silence settled between them like a fog. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unspoken. Then Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. And you still think corporate life is where you belong? That threw her. It wasn't a standard follow-up. It wasn't even a test. It sounded personal. Hailey tilted her head. I think I belong anywhere I can bring value. I think a job doesn't have to drain you if it lets you stand for something. Logan's eyes flickered. For the briefest moment, his guarded walls cracked. Just a little. You remind me of someone, he said, almost to himself. Hailey hesitated. Someone who spoke up. He smiled faintly, the first sign of softness in his face. Someone who didn't know when to quit. Someone who believed too much in people. She returned the smile, something subtle stirring in her chest. Well, I think the world needs more of those people. Even if they get fired for it. Logan looked down at his hands for a second, thoughtful. Then, he did something unexpected. He closed his laptop. Not paused. Not minimized. Closed it. I don't know how you ended up in this room, he said quietly, but I'm glad you did. Hailey's brows drew together. What do you mean? He hesitated. Then finally said it. You weren't scheduled to interview with me today. My assistant had booked this slot for something else. A candidate for a creative director role. Not entry-level. Hailey's eyes widened. Wait, so I'm in the wrong interview? Technically, he said. But I'm not stopping it. She let out a breath, somewhere between a laugh and disbelief. So I barged into the wrong room and gave the speech of my life to the wrong guy. He chuckled, and the room lightened for the first time. Maybe not the wrong guy, he said. Their eyes locked again. It wasn't just professional anymore. Something was shifting in the air, quietly, subtly. Not romantic, not yet. But human. Deep. Real. He nodded toward the folder in front of her. Show me your portfolio. She opened it, suddenly more confident than she'd felt in months. As he flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from curiosity to something more like surprise. Her work wasn't flashy, but it was clean, clever, full of empathy. Campaigns that spoke to the heart rather than just to profits. You don't think like a junior, he muttered. She smiled. I don't feel like one, either. He looked at her again. Then the faintest smirk. I'm offering you a role today. It won't be easy. It won't be quiet. And I'll expect truth, especially when it's uncomfortable. Still interested? She blinked. Just like that. Just like that, he said. Sometimes, the best interviews come from mistakes. The hallway was quiet. Corporate white walls hummed under soft LED lights, footsteps echoing faintly in the distance. Hailey walked out of conference room 2 in a daze, the edges of her thoughts blurred with adrenaline and disbelief. Did that really just happen? She had come in expecting a short, polite conversation with HR. Instead, she had stumbled into the room of a senior executive, Logan, and somehow walked out with the offer of a real position. Not just any position, either. One that mattered. Her fingers gripped her portfolio tighter against her chest as she took a long breath. Her heels clicked as she turned left, headed toward the reception desk to check out and collect her visitor pass. And then, she saw him. Standing at the far end of the waiting lounge, leaning against the side wall in a navy blazer that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. Ishon. No. Not Ishon. That wasn't his name anymore. It had been years since she had even said it aloud. But there he was. Same crooked jawline, only more defined now. The same intense, almost too serious eyes. Except they looked older, shadowed, more tired than she remembered. Hailey stopped in her tracks, her breath catching so hard in her throat it felt like she'd choked on air. She hadn't seen him since that day in the hospital. The last day. And yet here he was, in a black corporate lanyard and formal shoes, staring directly back at her like some ghost stepped right out of her old life. "Hailey," he said, disbelief cutting through the soft hum of the hallway. She blinked once. Twice. Her lips parted but no words came. "I didn't," he started, but then stopped, pushing his hand through his hair like he was struggling to steady himself. "I didn't know you'd be here." Her voice came out softer than she expected. "Neither did I." There was a silence. One thick with weight. Not awkward. Just unfinished. "I work here," he said finally, as if that could explain everything. "I figured," she said, folding her arms, clutching her portfolio tighter. "Didn't expect you to still be in this city." "I never left," he replied. "You did." Her jaw clenched. He saw the flicker in her eyes and quickly looked away, like he regretted how that sounded. But the words hung there between them, like broken glass. "I didn't have a choice," she said quietly. "You didn't give me a choice," he replied. There it was. The raw truth. The unsaid weight they'd both been dragging behind them for years. The pain. The heartbreak. The day she left the hospital without saying goodbye. She looked at him, really looked, and realized that though time had changed his posture, his clothes, even the quiet lines on his face, it hadn't changed the way he used to look at her. Not completely. And in that moment, she wasn't standing in an office hallway anymore. She was 19 again, holding his hand in a waiting room, whispering promises about forever. Promises they both knew were broken. "I came back," she said, almost defensively. "For the interview." He raised an eyebrow, his voice low. "And for Logan?" Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. I saw you two through the glass." Something about the way he said it, measured, calm, but not neutral, made her pulse race. "Are you seriously jealous right now?" she asked, incredulous. He looked down. "No. I just didn't expect to see the girl who left me beside a hospital bed, sitting across from the guy who writes our company's rejection letters." Hailey stepped closer, her voice firmer now. "You don't get to do this, Ishon. Not after all these years. Not in the middle of my interview." He looked up. For the first time, there was a flicker of pain in his eyes. Regret. Maybe something else. "I kept waiting for a sign," he said softly. "Anything. A message. An email. Even a rumor. And you disappeared." "I had to," she said, just as quietly. "You know I had to." They stood there, two ghosts in business attire, stuck in a hallway that suddenly felt too small for everything between them. Then finally, he stepped back. "I'm glad you're doing well," he said. "Really? I mean that." She looked at him, searching for sarcasm but finding none. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Because in that second, she realized there was still a version of them that lived somewhere in both their hearts. One they couldn't touch anymore. She nodded once. "Take care, Ishon." He gave her a tight smile, nodded back, and turned away. As she walked down the hallway toward the exit, her reflection passed in the polished glass, stronger now, steadier. And maybe, just maybe, more whole than when she'd walked in. The revolving glass doors spun shut behind her with a faint whoosh, sealing the cool, filtered air of the building away from the hot street outside. Hailey stepped out, blinking into the sunlight, her pulse still unsteady, as if her body was trying to catch up with everything her heart had just felt. She stood there for a moment, motionless, the polished folder pressed tightly against her chest like a shield. Around her, the world continued, cars honked, people passed, phones rang, but her mind was still echoing with Ishan's voice, with Logan's unexpected warmth, with the weight of 1,000 memories she thought she'd buried. She hadn't just walked into an interview. She had walked back into her past, stumbled into a decision she wasn't ready to make, and now she wasn't sure what any of it meant. She took a step toward the sidewalk. "Hailey!" She froze. The voice came from behind her, firm, familiar. She turned around slowly. Logan was jogging out of the building, his suit jacket unbuttoned, a tablet tucked under his arm. His dark hair moved slightly in the breeze, and his expression was softer than it had been inside. He stopped just in front of her, a little out of breath. I realized I never got your answer." She blinked. "My answer?" "To the offer." She hesitated. "Wasn't sure you were serious." He tilted his head slightly. "You think I offer people jobs just to be nice?" "No, but it didn't feel like a job interview." It felt like, her voice trailed off. "Like a conversation," he offered, a slight smile touching his lips. She nodded. "That's because I don't hire resumes," Logan said. "I hire people who make me stop talking and start listening. And you did that the moment you started telling me about that night at the lake with your dad." She looked at him, surprised. "You remembered that?" "I remembered everything." They stood there for a beat, the sun casting long shadows behind them. "You told me you took the train into the city this morning," he asked. She nodded again. He glanced behind her at the station platform. "You planning to take the same one back?" "I hadn't thought that far ahead." "Then don't." "What do you mean?" "I mean, don't go back to waiting," he said gently. "Don't go back to hiding behind part-time jobs and side hustles and that quiet voice in your head telling you you're not enough." She inhaled sharply. "Come work with us," he said. "Come build something that matters. Let this be your new chapter." She was quiet for a long moment. She wasn't used to being seen this clearly. Not since her father passed. Not since Ishan. Not since she lost who she was trying to become. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if I mess it up?" Logan smiled gently. "Then you'll try again. And this time, you won't be alone." Something in her chest cracked open. Her walls, so carefully built, so silently reinforced, suddenly didn't feel like they could hold anymore. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, vulnerable. "Okay," she whispered. He blinked. "Okay?" She nodded, a small but growing smile breaking across her lips. "I'll take the job." For a moment, they just stood there. A stranger no longer. A choice made. A chapter opened. Then he extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Hailey." She shook it, firmly. For the first time in years, her hand didn't tremble. As he turned to head back into the building, he paused. "Oh, and one more thing." She looked up. "I think you should talk to him," Logan said. She hesitated. "I don't know if I can. Maybe not today. But someday." He smiled. "Sometimes healing starts by reopening doors we slammed shut." And with that, he disappeared back through the glass doors. Hailey stood there for a moment longer, then slowly looked toward the building, toward the sidewalk, toward the station. And somewhere deep inside, under the armor, under the fears, under the years of surviving, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the fragile kind. Not the kind that flutters and fades. The kind that stays. The kind that begins with a step forward. She took it. The apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the steady rhythm of rain against the windowpane. The city, always pulsing with noise, seemed momentarily hushed, as if holding its breath for something unspoken. Hailey sat cross-legged on her bed, still in the same clothes she'd worn to the interview, her blazer draped over the back of a chair. Her shoes lay abandoned by the door. The moment she got home, she hadn't wanted to move. She just Saturday. And Saturday. And thought. In her lap rested a showbox, the kind that holds memories no one else is supposed to see. She opened it slowly. Inside were old photos, her father, smiling wide in the front yard, holding a young Hailey in his arms, a high school essay with a red A+ from a teacher who believed in her, dried petals from the bouquet she never threw away from the first and last dance she ever attended. And then the letters. Some written by her. Some never sent. Some written to herself during the lowest months, pages of frustration, pain, loneliness, longing. She pulled out one folded sheet, creased at the corners, faded from time. It was addressed to Dad. She had written it a year after he passed but never mailed it, never even read it again. Until now. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter. Dear Dad. I'm sorry I haven't written in a while. I don't even know what to say half the time. Things haven't been easy since you left. The world doesn't feel safe without you. I got a job at a cafe, not what I dreamed of, I know. But it pays enough to keep me going. Some days I see people come in wearing suits and looking like they have it all figured out, and I wonder if I missed the train, if I should have tried harder. I wish I could ask you. I wish you were still here to tell me I'm still enough. Asterisk. A tear dropped onto the page. She quickly wiped it away. Hailey folded the letter back up, her chest tightening. Then she saw it, the envelope at the bottom of the box. One she didn't recognize. Her name was written across it. Her breath caught. It was her father's handwriting. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Hailey. I wrote this knowing I might never get the chance to say it in person. If you're reading this, it means time has moved on, and I'm no longer there to annoy you about eating vegetables or waking up early. But you should know this, whatever you're doing in life, whatever path you choose or stumble onto. You were always meant for more. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. You have my heart. You have my strength. And you have everything it takes to build a life full of meaning. Never settle, baby girl. And never let your past be heavier than your hope. Asterisk. By the time she finished reading, Hailey was crying quietly, tears rolling freely down her cheeks. Not the kind that came from weakness, but from release. For the first time in years, she felt like she could finally exhale. She placed the letter gently back into the envelope and tucked it into her nightstand drawer, next to her wallet. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time, she was ready to face it, with all the pieces of herself, not just the ones the world found acceptable. She lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. And in the silence, she whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the world clean, drop by drop. And inside, Hailey's heart was slowly doing the same. The dawn broke gently, as if the world itself wanted to wake her with care. Sunlight streamed through the curtains in thin golden ribbons, cutting across the small apartment like a painter's brush. Hailey stood in the kitchen, stirring a modest cup of coffee. She hadn't dressed yet, just an oversized shirt and soft flannel shorts. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. but there was a calm in her. For the first time in a long time, her shoulders didn't feel like they were carrying the weight of things left unsaid. She took a slow sip and leaned against the counter. The box of memories still sat on the nightstand, undisturbed, but her heart had shifted since last night. Something had unlocked. Not magically, not all at once, but like a door that had always been cracked, finally pushed open by a gust of courage. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at it without urgency, expecting spam, or maybe a reminder to pay some forgotten bill. But it wasn't that. It was an email. Subject line, follow-up, interview with Mr. Logan Hartwell. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't expected anything. Had almost convinced herself yesterday was a dream, or at least a moment that passed without consequence. She opened it slowly. The message read, "Dear Hailey, thank you for your time yesterday. Though you arrived by accident, your presence reminded us what interviews are truly about: heart, honesty, and the courage to show up. We'd like to invite you back. Not for the position you stumbled into, but for something more aligned with what you shared. We are creating a new pilot program for inner-city mentorship designed by those who've lived it. If you're willing, we'd love for you to be a founding voice. Warmly, Logan Hartwell, Executive Director, Hartwell Foundation *. Hailey read it once. Then again. Her hand covered her mouth, eyes wide. Was this real? She set the mug down and walked in slow circles across the apartment, the words bouncing around in her mind. A second chance. No, this wasn't a second chance. This was the first real one. Hailey stood in the kitchen, stirring a modest cup of coffee. She hadn't dressed yet, just an oversized shirt and soft flannel shorts. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. But there was a calm in her. For the first time in a long time, her shoulders didn't feel like they were carrying the weight of things left unsaid. She took a slow sip and leaned against the counter. The box of memories still sat on the nightstand, undisturbed, but her heart had shifted since last night. Something had unlocked. Not magically, not all at once, but like a door that had always been cracked, finally pushed open by a gust of courage. Her phone vibrated. She glanced at it without urgency, expecting spam, or maybe a reminder to pay some forgotten bill. But it wasn't that. It was an email. Subject line, follow-up, interview with Mr. Logan Hartwell. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't expected anything. Had almost convinced herself yesterday was a dream, or at least a moment that passed without consequence. She opened it slowly. The message read, "Dear Hailey, thank you for your time yesterday. Though you arrived by accident, your presence reminded us what interviews are truly about: heart, honesty, and the courage to show up. We'd like to invite you back. Not for the position you stumbled into, but for something more aligned with what you shared. We are creating a new pilot program for inner-city mentorship designed by those who've lived it. If you're willing, we'd love for you to be a founding voice. Warmly, Logan Hartwell, Executive Director, Hartwell Foundation *. Hailey read it once. Then again. Her hand covered her mouth, eyes wide. Was this real? She set the mug down and walked in slow circles across the apartment, the words bouncing around in her mind. A second chance. No, this wasn't a second chance. This was the first real one. And it came not because she had the perfect answers, but because she showed her real self. The messy parts. The vulnerable ones. The version of her that used to feel like it had no place at any table. Hailey sat down, her breath catching with emotion. Her fingers hovered over her phone. For a second, doubt crept in. Am I good enough for this? But then she remembered the letter. She remembered the version of her father's voice that told her, "You were always meant for more." She clicked reply. "Dear Mr. Hartwell, thank you. Not just for the opportunity, but for seeing me. Yes, I'd be honored. Sincerely. Hailey Carter **. She pressed send. For a moment, she just sat there watching the email disappear into the digital current of the world. And then something beautiful happened. She smiled. Not the practiced, polite kind of smile you wear for others, but a real one. The kind that starts in the chest and blooms slowly across your face when you realize you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Hailey, standing in front of the window, sunlight washing over her, holding the coffee mug close to her chest. The world beyond the glass is still waking up, but inside her, something has already begun. The elevator chimed softly as the doors opened to the 11th floor. Hailey stepped out, her heels clicking with quiet purpose against the polished tiles. The same floor she had once walked into by mistake now welcomed her back with open glass doors and the name Hartwell Foundation etched in steel above the lobby. But this time, she wasn't lost. She wasn't hiding. She had come on purpose. She wore a pale blue blouse with a soft neckline and a blazer, not to impress anyone, but because it felt like her. Her curls framed her face naturally, and the same notebook she once clutched nervously was now organized with handwritten notes and sketches for the mentorship program she was about to help design. At the end of the hallway stood the conference room. Inside, Logan Hartwell waited, along with 3 members of the board. They were sipping coffee, laughing at something he'd said, the energy casual and kind. She paused for a breath just before entering, not out of fear, but reverence. Because this wasn't just a meeting. This was the room she never thought she'd be invited into. The room she used to believe was built for someone else. And yet here she was, walking toward it, not as an imposter, but as herself. She opened the door. "Hailey," Logan greeted, standing up with a warm smile. "Right on time." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, offering a confident smile of her own. The board members turned and nodded hello. No one sized her up. No one looked at her resume or her GPA or asked her where she saw herself in 5 years. They knew why she was here. She had already answered that question with her truth a week ago. Logan gestured to the empty seat beside him. "We've been looking at your outline," he said, placing a thick folder in front of her. "This mentorship model, it's personal, fresh, and rooted in real life. It's exactly what we're missing." Hailey's eyes sparkled. "Thank you. I kept thinking about what I needed when I was 16. And how different my life might have looked if someone had told me then that my story didn't disqualify me, it equipped me." A quiet moment passed. One of the older board members, a woman with silver hair and wise eyes, nodded slowly. "You're going to change lives, Miss Carter. Because you remember what it felt like to almost fall through the cracks." Hailey swallowed, emotion catching in her throat. She didn't try to hide it this time. Instead, she nodded. "And I want to help others climb out of the—" Hailey spoke clearly, but not perfectly. She laughed at herself when she stumbled over a few words. Logan helped guide the flow, but let her lead. The others listened, not as gatekeepers, but as equals. It wasn't polished. It wasn't textbook. It was real. And by the time they finished, there was no applause, but something better, understanding. Alignment. A shared vision. When the meeting wrapped up, Logan turned to her, his expression sincere. "We're lucky you walked into the wrong room, Hailey." She smiled. Maybe it was the right room all along. He grinned. "Yeah. Maybe it was. As she walked out, folder in hand, the same receptionist, Ms. Carter, offered her a knowing smile. "Looks like this time you did get the job," she teased warmly. Hailey chuckled, pausing beside her desk. "No," she said softly. "This time, I found where I was meant to be." And with that, she walked down the hallway, not toward the exit, but toward a future she never imagined she could write for herself. Because sometimes life's detours don't lead you away from your purpose. Sometimes they lead you straight to it. Hailey walking out of the building under the golden afternoon light, wind gently blowing her hair, holding the folder tight to her chest with a small, fulfilled smile on her face. She passes people in suits, in jeans, all heading to their places. But today, she knows where she's going.